So, hi, welcome to another episode of Insights with NetSupport with me, Mark Anderson, Head of Education at NetSupport, here live from BET 2023. It gives me great pleasure to introduce onto this episode of Insights the one and only Mr. Jez Belas. Jez is a former PE teacher, head of sport, held pastoral roles such as head of year, and now works at a company he's co-founded, started called YouHQ, with a focus on well-being in schools. We're at BET, so I'll ask you a question about BET first. Actually, you've got a stand in BET Futures. How's that going for you?
Hi Mark, yeah, thank you. It's been great actually. So yeah, two busy days. It's been really interesting being over in Futures. Lots of interesting people coming over, investors, some teachers, people from all over the world, which is really interesting. Yeah, it's been great. I was on a panel, wellbeing panel yesterday, which is a really interesting discussion. Lots of different things coming out of it, but yeah, really enjoyed the first 2 days.
Fantastic. YouHQ, the product is about well-being to support young people. As a parent myself, and the first time that Jez and I met, I was super excited. I mean, I was getting a bit fanboy, as I remember, to be honest. But as a parent myself, I know firsthand how impactful the pandemic has been in how it's impacted on the well-being of my children. You'll know this, that they swim lots, county level for my eldest, approaching county for the younger. It massively hit them and their mental health and well-being during the pandemic. We're still seeing the ramifications of it even now. Could you share some insights based upon your experience within the schools sort of setting, but also now with your work with YouHQ? Could you share any insight into some approaches or some things that teachers might have to consider to help young people as they're still going on that journey back to where they were pre-pandemic? Can you share a few insights for us, Jez?
Yeah, of course. It's really interesting you speak about your children and the sport and the swimming that they do. Obviously, I've got a background as a PE teacher and a director of sport, so I'm very biased in how powerful physical activity is and the impact it can have. It's really interesting, Mark. I don't know whether you've seen any of the stuff that Sport England have been putting out recently, but there's a great pilot study they've done in North London, right, where they've been looking at specifically using physical activity with talking therapies, right, and actually, prescribing more physical activity to improve the mental health of patients. So, one thing I would say is to teachers, doesn't mean you have to go out on a sports field necessarily, but I've always been a massive advocate of just movement in the classroom, getting off your bum and moving. Yeah. And there's a huge amount I've done workshops where I've just stopped in the middle where they've all been sat down. I said, get up, start moving, smiling all of a sudden. So it sounds really simple, but something like that's really interesting. And it's something that at YouHQ, because there's 4 directors, I'm obviously one of them, we're all sports scientists. So right, we're really big fans of bridging that gap again between the physical and the mental health side of things. Something I've spoken to Kat about, can we maybe reframe, especially in primary schools, look at mental health maybe as mental fitness, look at how we can maybe take some accountability of how we can look after our own or be accountable for our own mental health by doing things that we can control. And that's one of the messages we're trying to go into schools and not put too much pressure on young people, but say, look, there are things you can do. It's not just, don't just leave it to chance. Do as much as you can to look after yourself. I think that's really important.
It's interesting, I mentioned the sport thing myself with them swimming and things, but actually, one of the things I've been sort of thinking about in recent years actually is around mental health and mental fitness, as you say. People take, and as you can probably tell, I'm not one who partakes of the gym much myself, unfortunately, but people do take their physical fitness really seriously, right? I live next door to a fitness coach, for example, and it's serious business looking after yourself, and I should do better, and I know I should. But just like I should do better with my own physical fitness, I think perhaps it's the case that people could do an awful lot to actually spend time thinking about their mental fitness as well. Have you got any thoughts around that? Because people will sign up to the gym, but how many people sign up to a mental gym to improve their mental fitness?
It's a really good point. And we met the founder of the app Calm, and he was very much along the lines of the last 15 to 20 years. You look at the growth of the physical fitness industry, billion dollar industry. Mental health is a word that's used a lot, but there's still stigma, there's still a negative connotation. People think of mental health as ill mental health. Yeah. And that's why, whether you call it mental fitness, mental health, whatever you call it, let's really wrap it up in something super positive. I've had brainwaves where in PE, can we maybe rebrand it? Does it have to be called physical education? Could it be called physical and mental education? Could it be called something slightly different? Because a huge part of what I became interested in my latter stages of teaching a couple of years ago was again, going back to what we said, the power of physical activity doesn't have to be competitive sport, and that's not the only thing. Look, there's so many other things that we can talk about as well, but that is an interesting thing. So I think that in schools, whatever they do, whichever part of the curriculum, or on the panel yesterday, amazing lady who was a media studies and computer science teacher who decided to use her Year 9 class as a project to build a mental health and wellbeing focused app. And she wasn't a trained mental health individual, but she had an interest in that area,
right.
And she built that into the curriculum. So she used her subject to build that in, and I think that's the sort of thing we're looking at. How can schools embed a positive well-being / mental health culture within their school for kids and for teachers? Because a lot of the things that have come out from being here, especially yesterday, our app was initially focused at the well-being and mental health of young people and students. Now we've got teachers saying, what about me? Because I want to support these young people, but I can't support them if I don't feel mentally strong enough, resilient enough myself to support them. So I think we're really looking at this cultural shift now in schools where we really do want it to be a genuine whole school well-being approach, which is really hard for senior leaders to do, but that's where companies like us hopefully can come in, and not just with the app, but with expertise and with support in different areas, we can hopefully help create a really strong culture in those schools so everyone does feel supported and looked after.
That's really interesting and helpful, and best of luck with the app, and we'll get some more details from you after we finish this conversation. I've got one more question for you, which is linking into the conversation we're having, which is really interesting. As someone who comes from education myself, just like yourself and what have you, over the years we do see mental health being addressed in schools, but it's like a plaster. There's a day for it. You only need that sort of support one day a year for 5 minutes on an inset day where you get given a cake or whatever it is, right? We know it should be holistic, right? So have you got any insights or tips for viewers about how you can approach these things and make things holistic, not just for the students but for staff as well?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I think you're right. They shouldn't be one-off, should they? They shouldn't be just one-off events. When they're one-off events, you're almost saying that there's no space for it. So I think the messaging that schools give and the time, like you said, the time they give this side of things is really, really important. So I go back to the point I made. Let's not just build mental health into a token gesture part of PSHE, mm-hmm. or just into tutor time. It needs to be a really big part of everything that we're looking at education-wise for young people. And I think that in terms of the holistic approach, I do think that getting and working with younger students is really, really important, because what we're finding is by the time they hit year 10 probably, it's almost too late. It's not too late, but in their heads, I think, and for the teachers it almost is, it's really hard then to change behaviours. So let's get that. We look at this as a skill. We look at self-reflection, whether you're clicking on an emoji, filling in a survey, or even just spending some time to self-reflect yourself, whether it's mindfulness, breathing technique, anything that you can do. Let's place huge importance on that. And let's do it young, let's do it early, so that young people grow up knowing how important that is and feeling the positive impact of doing those practices. And that education, I think, again, holistically, there's so many areas that we could talk about. One of the key things that we're finding with young people is they're saying that sleep is something that, and that's one of the the report that the Department for Education have brought out in February. One of the key areas is sleep. Sleep links in with social media, links in with screens. There's various different things, but again, we need to look at health as a really holistic thing. It's not just mental health, it's sleep health, it's physical health, it's social health, all those things, which does make it a holistic thing.
Brilliant. So many things you've shared there. I hope you found that conversation interesting. Jez, if you want to find out more about you and YouHQ, where can they go to find out more, mate?
Yeah, so youhq.co.uk is our website. Just go there. There's a host of free resources that we've got on there. If you go to the resources page, we've got teacher resources, student resources, we've got a whole host of things that we've done with NetSupport. NetSupport have been a really big support for us as a young growing company. So yeah, that's where you go, and there's a free trial page. You can book a demo with us there as well, and then all the social media channels are YouHQ for School, so you can look us up on Instagram and all the various social media channels as well.
Wicked stuff. So YouHQ for Schools is where it's at. Before we wrap up though, I want to ask you one final question actually, because we're here on the NetSupport stands. You mentioned that you've worked with us on a few things, what have you. What do you think of what NetSupport do as a company? How our activities, how we're interacting at bet, these sort of things. Have you got any comments about what we do and how we do things?
I have actually. Number one, the stand is awesome. I'm really impressed. I love your radio station in the car. I really want to get in there. Can we get in there?
We can sort that out, I'm sure. Yeah.
I'll tell you the thing I think NetSupport has clearly got a really fantastic group of people, and ultimately that's what companies are, right? So whatever you're doing, whether you say you're wellbeing, mental health, or all the different amazing products you guys have got, what I found is we've come into contact with NetSupport along the line. You and I and Al did a chat. It's probably, I don't know how long ago it was, but it was probably a long time ago, over a year ago, right?
More than a year, I think. Now,
yeah. So all the way from that journey through, NetSupport have kind of, someone from NetSupport's been there. Whether it's Matt, whether it's you, whether it's Al, all the different people. You've got a really great team of people, and I think that really comes through when you come to the stand and you talk to people, and there's a genuine interest in what we're doing. And I really like that. That's really nice. So yeah, you've been, like I say, you've been a really good support for us. You continue to be. We continue doing collaboration with Kat and with yourself and with the various other people. So yeah, thank you, and thank you to the NetSupport team.
Listen, Insights with NetSupport here live from Bet23. Jez Belas from YouHQ. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for joining me for this episode of Insights with NetSupport live from Bet 2023.